Hi friends, and welcome back to Shay's Kitchen. Today we're going to be talking about baking. As you can see from the thumbnail, my last video, or maybe the video I posted before last, I had some cakes in the background and I shared that I bake every other week and I sell cake by the slices, and I had a viewer ask if I could actually do a video that basically discussed baking 101. So that's what we're doing today. But first, let me introduce myself. My name is Shay and I love to cook. So what you find here on my channel is mostly easy and delicious meals focused for working moms. So I would love for you to go ahead, hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so that you will be notified each and every time I upload a new video. And obviously, if you're a returning viewer, welcome back. So I don't want to hold you too long. We're going to go ahead and start discussing this baking. I get super excited when I talk about baking because it is a love of mine, something that has been passed down from my grandmother to me. So I am here to share it with all my viewers as well as family members that also watch it. Family members that also watch that enjoy Granny's cooking as well and what she has taught me. So obviously I'm not in the kitchen. It is in the middle of the workday and the kids are downstairs and they are still in school. So I had to migrate up to the bedroom to do this, but I'm definitely going to try to make sure I cover everything. If I leave something out, don't hesitate to go ahead and just ask any additional questions in the comment section. I will get back to you as soon as possible. So let's just go ahead and get started here. For Baking 101, what we will be discussing, it's going to be three major components. It's going to be the recipes, moisture, and ratios. I think I can kind of catch everything in those three categories. Now first, let's talk about recipes. A little bit really quick about myself. I have a degree in biochemistry. So my background is basically science-based. And I remember we had this research project that we had to do. And the number one thing that they said is you do not reinvent the wheel. So for me, a lot of times I don't go in the kitchen and I don't just pull out all of my ingredients and start just putting things together and hoping that it comes out. That's typically not how I would develop a recipe. That's not what I do in order to test recipes or anything like that. So what I do is I find a good recipe that I feel will come out right. I follow that recipe to the T and then I tweak it from there. I will discuss just a little further into the video what I look for in specific recipes. But guys, I just want to tell you, look for a recipe that you feel like you would like to cook that recipe the way it is written, and then tweak it from there based on what I tell you next in the video. Okay, so in a recipe, basically it's going to be two components. This completely could be like pre-beginners, but I do want to just make sure that I explain everything for those of you that may not know. So a recipe is going to be broken down into basically two things. You're going to have your dry ingredients and you're going to have your wet ingredients. Your dry ingredients, they are going to consist of your flour, your baking powder, your salt, any baking soda that may be in the recipe, cocoa powder, any of those things. And again, this will just depend on the type of cake that you're going to make, what type of dry ingredients are going to be in it, but there definitely will be flour, powder, salt, sugar, and those things will definitely be in any recipe. Then you have your wet ingredients. Your wet ingredients will be eggs, milk, oil, sour cream, vinegar. Again, depends on what you are adding, your flavoring. All of those things are going to be part of the wet ingredients. So when they say combine your dry ingredients, or you want to combine your wet ingredients, you want to make sure that you are pulling those out and putting those together. Again, it's going to depend on the recipe. Now, when it comes to the recipe, I know that I have researched and found recipes that I would like to try, and then I get down to the instructions, and when I say recipes, cake recipes, gets down to the instructions, and they have me doing all kinds of things. And again, I always follow it to the T, because again, this is not my recipe. I want to see how to recreate what they have. Every time, guys, never fails. It does not come out the way that I want it if it is not following the steps that I believe a cake should follow. Again, this is just my opinion. But basically, when you are baking a cake, there are chronological steps that you should be following, in my opinion. The first is creaming. And what creaming means is basically you are combining your oil, whatever oil it is, with your sugar. So that could be a vegetable oil, that could be butter. You know, that oil needs to be creamed with the actual sugar. And you want to do this about 2 minutes at minimum. I typically go between 2 and 3 minutes. And you're looking for the color to change. If you are using butter, then your mixture will be like a yellow tint. But once you cream it, and you cream it well, and I will say if you're using a KitchenAid, you want to cream at about a 2. Okay, don't go higher than a 2. Again, my opinion. But you're looking for the color of that to change from like a yellow tint to a really light whitish yellow tint. Okay, then and I'm sorry, and if you're using oil, then it's going to obviously go from an oil sugar mixture to a very light white color. It's going to be fluffy. So at that point, you have creamed successfully, and you want to move on to the next step, which is adding your eggs. Now, eggs, you want to add them 2 at a time. So if your recipe only calls for 2, you add 2. If your recipe calls for 4, you add 2 at a time, and you want to cream or let the blender go 30 seconds in between adding the additional eggs. Okay. Then, oh, also here, if you have any additions like food coloring, Jello packets, things that are considered dry and are special to that cake, then you want to add them at this point too. Okay, the reason being is if you have a food coloring or like a Jello pack, so if you're making a strawberry or a key lime or anything like that, then you may have to add a pack of Jello, or the recipe may call for a pack of Jello, and you want to add it at this point because you want to make sure that it is fully incorporated and not incorporated by hand. So add that at this point and let the blender go for about another minute or 2. Now you want to actually bring all the ingredients together with your flour and your milk. Okay, I typically will use buttermilk across the board with the majority of my cakes. I can only name one that I do not, but buttermilk is going to be your liquid. With your vanilla, I like to add my vanilla into my milk. So that's going to be there off to the side. And then you're going to have your dry ingredients that you have sifted together in a bowl. Now, when you're adding your dry, you want to begin with the dry. So your flour mixture, then add in half of your milk mixture. And so the dry is going to be in a third. So 1/3 of the dry ingredients, half of your milk mixture, and then another third of the dry. Add the remaining of the milk. And then you want to end always with your dry. Okay, so I usually will cut my flour mixture up into 3s, and my milk mixture is always in half. Okay, so I always do this on like a 1 on my KitchenAid, or in between stir and 1, because I don't want to over mix my cake mixture, and that is something that you do want to make sure that you are mindful of. Do not over mix your cakes, because the more you mix it, the tougher the cake will be, because yeah, it's over mixed, and it's, I don't want to say tough. It's just like scratch your throat kind of dry. You don't want to do that, okay? Now, I have notes here, so I'm just trying to make sure I get everything. And here, after you have added the last little bit of your flour ingredients, now is the point where if you have anything to fold into the cake, then this is where you do it. So that would be fresh fruit. If you're gonna add coffee as a component of your milk, as a component of your cake. If you are going to add fresh juice as a component of your cake. Now, this is the point where you would fold it in. So you don't fully incorporate that dry mixture in, because you're going to be folding something else in. So I just usually let it go a few times on the mixture, on the KitchenAid, after I've added my dry ingredients. Then I turn it off, pull it out, and then if I have to fold anything in, I will fully incorporate everything with the folding of those ingredients. Again, fresh fruit, fresh fruit juice, any type of cookies, any type of like coffee. These are the things that you want to add in last and fold in. Now let's talk about, okay, so that is recipes. Now we're going to move on to moisture, okay? So there are a few things that you can add to your cake if you want to increase moisture. So at the beginning of the video, I talked about don't reinvent the wheel. Take a recipe, prepare that cake based off of the recipe, and if you don't like it, then you can go and tweak these things. So say you pull a recipe out, you bake that recipe, and it is dry. You know, you want it to be more moist, more fluffy. Then what you are essentially saying is you want to add more oil to the actual recipe, okay? And there's a few ways that you can add oil. First, add oil. I typically will add vegetable oil to cakes that I need to add oil to. Or if I'm making a cake and I have to use a liquid oil that is liquid at room temperature, then I'm going to pull vegetable oil because it has no taste and no smell. Okay, so that's one way. Another way is adding egg yolks. Okay, so just the egg yolk, crack the egg, discard of the egg white, or use it in some, use it for breakfast the next morning or something like that if you don't want to throw it away. But adding egg yolk will add additional fat to your cake and will cause your cake to be moist. Now, I typically don't go this route because of the egg yolk color. So if it's a vanilla cake, you really want to be mindful because it will really make your cake more yellow. And I don't like that. I don't know. That's just a personal preference. So just think about that if you are going to be adding egg yolk to try to give your cake more moisture. If you need a true white cake, then you don't want to do that. So that's important if you are making like excuse me, my nose is tickling. My nose is itching. You want to be more mindful of that if you have like a wedding cake or something that you're going to be making. So that's one way. And then you can also add sour cream. Now I'm talking about full fat sour cream, okay? Again, we're talking about fats increase the moisture. But also know if you're going to add sour cream, you are making your cake more dense at the same time. So you have to be mindful of that. I typically, if I'm going to be adding sour cream to a cake of mine, then I am going to knock down. Yes? No, not right now. If I'm going to be adding sour cream to my cake, then I'm typically going to be knocking down the temperature on my oven, just because I want it to rise, and I want it to rise at a steady increase instead of cooking it too fast and not giving it enough time for the sour cream to like really help the cake out. So if you cook it too fast, tend to get a moist, dense cake, so it doesn't rise as high. So keep that in mind as well if you are going to opt in to use sour cream to give your cake more moisture. And then the other thing is you can do a combination of all of those in order to get the moisture content that you want out of a cake. So that is typically where I go. I make sure I have a nice balance of all of those fats, or at least the oil and the egg combination. So that's the moisture. And so if you're looking for recipes on the internet and you want to try something, again, we're not reinventing the wheel. Take a look at how much oil is in it, take a look at how much fat is actually in the recipe, and then you can go off of that. That's one way to determine if a recipe is even going to be worth trying. Okay. Now let's talk about ratios. So for me, if I am going to say take to Pinterest and look for a recipe, obviously the first thing I'm going to be using are my eyes. Does that picture that's on that Pinterest post look like a cake that I would like to present as, hey, look at my cake that I baked. It's really, really yummy. If it does not get past my eyes, I'm going to keep scrolling. So say I find one that catches my eye. I pull it up, I go to the link or the site that has the full recipe, and I'm going to immediately scroll down to the recipe. And at that point, what I'm going to be looking for are ratios, okay? So when it comes to baking, remember it is a science. There are specific ratios that I feel like work the best for a good tasting cake, okay? So, and the ratio that I'm looking for basically is flour and sugar ratios. So if a recipe has 3 cups of flour, then at least 3 cups of flour, because sometimes it'll be like 3 cups and a fourth of flour, or 3 cups and 3/4 cup of a flour. If it has 3 cups of flour, then I expect that recipe to also have 3 cups of sugar. Okay, so those ratios are approximately 1 to 1. Okay, this is my personal opinion. You do not have to follow this if you want a 3. If you want a 3-2, no. You do not have to follow this. This is just my opinion. After you make recipes and you feel like a 1-to-1 ratio between sugar and flour is too rich for you or too sweet, then by all means, knock it down, work with it, tweak it until it is the ratio that you like. So that's going to be the first thing that I look for. And if it doesn't have that, I'm going to keep scrolling. Okay. So after that, I look at baking powder. So if a recipe has 3 tablespoons, no, if it has 3 cups of sugar, 3 cups of flour, then I at least want to see 2 teaspoons of baking powder, at the max a tablespoon. Okay, so we're almost right there at a 1-to-1 ratio. And that's just important because you, again, want the cake to rise and you want the distribution of sugar and flour to basically almost be equal so that when you are eating it, you taste both. Okay, well, you don't really want to taste flour, but if you understand what I mean. So that's what I'm looking for when I search for a recipe. And if it has most of the components, then I might know exactly after I make it and it doesn't taste the way I want it to taste. I know exactly where I need to add in order for it to get to where I want it to be. Okay. Now, I've gone over recipes, moistures, and ratios. I just want to share a few tips that I have learned along my baking journey that have really helped me. So the biggest tip that I can offer is getting the right flour when it comes to cakes. You want your cake to be tender, you want it to be moist, you want it to be fluffy, and all flours are not equal. If I'm going to recommend a flour, my number one choice is going to be cake flour, and I use Swan's cake flour, but there are others out there, but Swan is really easily available for me here in Georgia, so that's what I use. Now, Swan flour can be expensive, and I'm not saying expensive like, oh my gosh, it's $5. No, it's expensive because you don't get a lot of flour for your $3.30 or whatever it is that you're going to be charged for, in comparison to a 5-pound bag of all-purpose flour. So if you are going to use an all-purpose flour, and I do use it with some of my cakes, I always use White Lily. White Lily brand is going to have the least amount of protein, and I will actually show you a comparison. So when you look at any flour that you buy, should actually have a number on it or a reference to the protein content in that bag of flour. White Lily's tends to be, I want to say, an 8. Don't quote me, I'm pulling it out of my head, but it is low comparison to like an Author's. I think it's Author's, I can't remember. I will definitely be, including that in this video, but you don't want anything that I believe is over like 11, okay? Because then that kind of is going into like breads, because the protein in it is going to be equivalent to the amount of gluten that is going to be able to be produced by that flour. And the more gluten you have, the more chewy or the more tough that flour is going to produce for you. So anything over like an 11, that's more for breads, okay? So White Lily or cake flour, Swan brand, if you are in the Georgia area and you want to know what you can find easily. Second, a lot of recipes will call for like unsalted butter. Guys, I like the salt in my butter when I'm baking, period, okay? Period. I know they say to, control the salt content, always use unsalted butter. And I like my stuff to taste good, and salted butter tastes better in cookies, in cakes, in pastries, in anything, guys, in any dessert. Use the salted butter. Again, my opinion, you do what you want to do you. But I'm trying to give you tips to what I know. If you use it, it's gonna taste good. Next thing, if you are baking a cake and you are using a KitchenAid or a stand mixer, use the paddle attachment. I know I see people using the whisk attachment. That's putting too much air into the cake. Use the paddle attachment when you are baking for cakes, period. Okay? Also, before you bake, make sure that you pull out all your ingredients and keep them at room temperature at least 30 minutes before you use them. It is very important that everything is the same temperature before you go to bake, because you don't have to worry about adding one thing that is going to elevate the temperature or cause the cake to be cold and put into like a hot oven. Again, even keel, room temperature. When it goes into a hot oven at 350 degrees, you don't have to worry about the shock of that messing up your cake, okay? Now, the next thing is temperature of your oven. Now, obviously, full disclaimer, everybody's oven is different. So you need to adjust based off of how your oven cooks. But as a rule, cakes are baked between 325 degrees and 350 degrees. I have never baked a cake over 350 degrees, nor shall I ever make a cake that's over 350 degrees. It's just too hot, okay? There are incidences when you will need to knock it down to 325 degrees or knock it down at all, even if your temperature or even if your recipe calls calls for you to bake it at 350 degrees. So if you have dark cake pans, then those are going to cook faster. So you would not want to bake your cake at 350 degrees if you are making it in a dark, I think they call it anodized, I can't remember, cake pan. So you might need to adjust that. Bake it once, see if it's too crispy or too brown on the outside, or if it's not baking even. You know you need to tweak your oven temperature and maybe knock it down 5 degrees or 10 degrees, just depends on, you know, your oven. So you want to be mindful of that as well. Sorry guys, my battery ran out, so I had to throw it in the charger really quickly just so that I could end this video. But what I was trying to say, or what I was about to say, is if you're looking for a cookbook that really breaks it down, how and whys, all the hows and whys of baking from a scientific stance, then I do recommend Cookwise. I'll include the book just so that you guys see it, but it is Cookwise by Shirley Coroner. I cannot pronounce her last name, and I may be saying it wrong, but again, I will link the cookbook down below. It is also in my Amazon store, and I'll show you an overlay so that you can see the picture of the book here. But basically, Shirley is a biochemist. So basically, she really goes in and tells you everything about baking. So if you have the time or you have the interest to really dive deep into all the hows and whys of baking and cooking, again, this is not just baking, but this is cooking as well. Really, it breaks it all down for you. And so I bought that cookbook right out of college, and it really explained things really well for that state of mind that I was in. Now, I am many moons past being a biochemist, so it's not really pertinent information for me now. I just want my stuff to taste good. But if that is up your alley and you want to learn that, go ahead and click the link and purchase it. I promise it won't be a bad buy whatsoever. So that is my baking 101. I hope I covered everything. Like I said, if I didn't, just leave me a comment. I'll get back to you as fast as I can. If I don't know the answer, I'll look the answer up. If I do know it, girl, I will go ahead and give it to you. So definitely don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this video. If you haven't done so already, follow me over on Instagram at Shay's Country Kitchen. And until the next time, I just wanted to share with you guys, this is my official baking shirt. I use this when I'm baking my cake so that I don't get flour and stuff all on me. So I wanted to make sure that I got on here in the proper attire. So until the next time, I'll see you guys soon. Bye bye.